Let me introduce myself. I am Deepak Mohan, holding honorary post of treasurer with IMEI Cochin here. I have been given the responsibility of moderating today's presentation. So on behalf of the Executive Committee of Institute of Engineers, Kochi branch, let me officially welcome all of you to the second webinar on a very hot topic, which is in the current maritime environment, commercial aspects of coastal shipping, which I hope will help in establishing this as an environment friendly mode of transport, with the BS6 norms kicking in for road transport since April 2020. With India's long coastline and 11 major and 168 minor intermediate ports, I think this is a very is a very important mode of transport for bulk cargoes like coal, cement, and iron, steel, and food grains, for fertilizers, petroleum oils, etc. Our speaker today, Mr. Johnson Matthew, who I would say is a domain specialist and authority on this subject. He is CMD of Trans-Asian Shipping Services Private Limited, with varied interests spanning ship owning, liner service, coastal service, ship agency, logistics, etc. He will elaborate in detail on the economic aspects and commercial considerations on this subject. His detailed introduction will follow soon. Now I request our esteemed chairman of our institute, Mr. Thomas Kurian, to welcome this gathering. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. A very good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
I have great pleasure in welcoming all of you to this presentation on coastal shipping, the commercial aspects, by Mr. Johnson Matthew, CMD of Trans-Asia Group. I have very great pleasure in welcoming all of the participants for this webinar being hosted by Institute of Marine Engineers, Kochi branch. This is the second webinar we are conducting in the recent times. Now I invite Dr. K.M. Simon to introduce the subject expert, Mr. Johnson Matthew.
Good evening, everybody. I have great pleasure in introducing my friend, Mr. Johnson Matthew, to you all this evening. I know Mr. Johnson Matthew for the last couple of decades. He has already been introduced as CMD of Trans-Asia Company and all that. But I have found him to be a man of great passion for shipping, a man of environment protection, a man of innovative ideas, and a man who exhilarates when something positive happens in shipping, be it in commercial field or even in matters of energy savings or environment protection. And recently, India's first solar-powered catamaran passenger vessel was launched, and subsequently he was very happy in that achievement in technology. He was more than happy when Aditya, that was the name of the vessel, won an international award recently for operating on zero carbon principles. What made him happy was the vessel is not polluting our environment. Drawing inspiration from Chinese yards during his visit there, he went on and built and operated a container ship here in Cochin. The name of the vessel was Karindal. Incidentally, this was the first Indian vessel constructed with foreign classification society and built with local talents in Century Shipyard nearby. He has acquired his passion in shipping from his father, who was a seafarer himself. So we should feel proud and happy in that point. I dare say that Mr. Johnson Matthew remains in shipping business more due to his platonic reasons than anything else. If I say a few words about his background, after his graduation from Kerala University, he worked in Dubai with international shipping agencies and later with Noratia Lines Hong Kong and rose to the level of regional manager. Thereafter, he descended on to Cochin and continued his activities here. His company, Transasia Shipping, turnover now is over 500 crores. He is also into IT business. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you an innovative, young and erudite businessman, a doyen of shipping in India, Mr. Johnson K. Matthew. There you are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon sir. Now, before I hand over the hosting rights to Johnson sir, I'll just take 30 seconds to brief you on a few other aspects. I request all the participants to mute your audio during the presentation, otherwise it will create some background noise. Please share your queries during the course of the session using the chat option. Once the presentation is over, we will clear all the queries as much as possible within the allowed time limits. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everyone. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Institute of Marine Engineers of India, Dr. Simon, who is a close friend of mine, my mentor, sort of a person who had done me a favor of having invited me for doing the presentation. I am now getting into the mode of presentation. I am doing it through the PowerPoint presentation. There are about 28 slides in the whole of this. Each of you take something like about a minute or so. Thereby, I'm trying to sort of complete the presentation in a structured manner. Okay, thank you very much indeed. And it is a great honor to be in your midst to do this presentation. Coastal shipping, a commercial aspect. It's an important element that any venture that we are going into must be commercially viable. Viability is one of those things. So in order to know what exactly the viability is, we have to consider the commercial aspects. That's how I'm taking it over to the commercial aspects of coastal shipping. At the end of the Second World War in 1945, the world population was estimated to be about 2 billion people. What took us 10,000 generations to be 2 billion is now surpassed in about 3 times in the past 60 years. Life is better than that of our forefathers, certainly in the material field. For goods and services is ever increasing. People are less compromising. Expectations are large, and we have a better chance to achieve it today because of the technological advances that we have made. Having said that, the GDP growth of any country is fueled with competitive advantage and free market. I'm a proponent of the free market and competition. Reduction of cost by way of innovation and by way of doing better methodology is something which we should be looking at, and that is exactly what I'm planning to do, or I'm trying to do in the next slides. With containerization in 1956, the movement of factories to distant hinterlands were made available. As an example, Delhi and the ICDs in most of the industrial belts of North and Northwest India is an example of the factory moving to the hinterlands. Now, this has increased the purchasing power. The availability of goods and services are more or less global. It is not anymore related to a port-centric or a port. The question of location doesn't really exist anymore. It can be easily accessed. It's a multimodalism is possible. So it is in this context that we, in order to achieve the global standards, it's my opinion that we need to adopt to it. So containers are very, very popular. There are various types of containers that are available. In my opinion, about 90% of all cargo that is moving today is is capable of being containerized. This would reduce the overall cost, because that's what Malcolm McLean found in 1956. Thereby, he could reduce the overall handling and the overall transportation cost. Today, with a high capacity or a very large container carrier, which is about 24,000 TEUs, the cost per container, per TEU, per nautical mile has come down dramatically. So, the world is now in a position to separate themselves from the point of production and point of consumption. The global factory manufacturing was shifted to China, taking advantage of the labor arbitrage, and China was considered to be the global or the world's manufacturer or the world's factory. Things have now changed though, and that's exactly the reason people were looking at economies of scale and also looking at technological advancement, whereby they have now gone in for the largest ship today by way of container TEU intake is 24,000 TEU vessel, and there are many vessels which are in order. I believe in the next 3 or 4 years, you'll find most of the long hauls coming under the 24,000 category. In 1998, when the Regina Maersk, which was a 6,600 TEU vessel, was introduced, everybody was wondering what was going on. Now, it is a 24,000 TEU vessel. I will come closer to 6,600 TEU later on in the course of my presentation. There is certainly a lot of industrialization that has taken place. Distribution of wealth is taking place in a considerable manner, and I believe that the purchasing power of people all over the world has gone up. Now, this is allowing, by shifting factories into various places, the optimization of global sourcing is taking place. The growing consumption level and the inland penetration has now made it possible that land in the hinterland is also now becoming a production center. Consumption is here to stay. No matter which economy it is, non-durable goods and services are growing regardless of the economies. In the post-COVID context, it's my belief that India has got a huge opportunity because there is a lot of shift that is taking place by way of production center, or shift is taking place from China to other areas, and the people are now de-risking the political as well as the economic and the global strategic positioning. As a consequence, we're seeing a lot of shift of factories moving out of China. The highest beneficiary as of now is seen to be Southeast Asia. Vietnam, as an example, is growing very fast. Indonesia has taken over some amount of the movement of the factories out of China. Japan is incentivizing Japanese companies to move away from China and get into Japan, and they have offered about $2 billion to each company in order to shift their operation, the operating base or manufacturing base, into other countries, which includes Japan. So there is an opportunity for us. It is for the government of India and the people of India to make sure that we are also a part of this shift, and we are in a position to capture that part in a significant manner. Otherwise, we would consider ourselves to be a bit lazy and or inefficient or incompetent to be in the international business environment. India is one of the fastest growing economy in the world. Trade growth brings with it new challenges, such as the infrastructure, the availability of land, the availability of trained people, and so on and so forth. Infrastructure is one of the major components. It is a facilitator in the growth of the economy. Shipping in the logistics chain. With 90% of global traded goods and commodities moved by sea, shipping moves the global trade. In India, we move about 7% by waterways, both sea and inland water put together. Innovation have reduced the cost of carriage of goods multimodalism is the way forward and is achievable. Today, we are capable of doing it. And with the introduction of the dedicated freight corridor from the north and northwest India, we will find a lot of cargo that can be moved using a rail sea combination. The challenges are also immense. So our response possibilities are immense, so are the challenges. Estimated logistics expenses as a percentage of GDP. China, estimated cost of logistics is 16%. Taiwan is 13% of GDP. Singapore is 7%. India is 14%. Now, Korea is 13%. Japan is 9%. USA is 8%. UK is 10%. Indian logistics market is estimated to be worth about $280 billion as of now, with a projected growth of to $10 trillion by year 2025. If I remember correct, it is about 700 billion market. A percentage saving could be $5 billion saving, which could be plowed back into our economy, which would enable us to be more productive, more competitive in comparison. Primarily, what I would say is that the freight rate from China all the way to Europe versus freight rate from India to Europe is more or less same, or China could be about $50 less per TEU. So that is something which we will have to, that is something which we have to see when it becomes gets into the competitive environment. In fact, in 2015, I suppose, 15 or 16, we had one of the large vessels which came in on a maiden call. That was a 6,800 TEU vessel of Emirates Line. The line belongs to a friend of mine. So I did ask him for the invoice or the port cost of Cochin Port, and I made a comparison with the Cochin Port, between Cochin Port and Colombo. Cochin Port was 660% costlier than Colombo. And as you all know, it is only 24 hours away from Cochin. The ship left Cochin, Colombo, and reached Cochin in about 22 hours. And the cost difference that they had to pay was about $60,000. I was also doing operations, or I'm doing operations from Cochin to Middle East. The freight rate at which we were carrying this cargo prior to the arrival of this vessel was in the range of about $300 for a 24-hour. Today, the freight rate is $5. So that is the difference that has come by having that large vessel coming into Cochin. So now, in reality, more than about $250 had been saved by the shipper. So the money is remaining in the economy. We do about 1,200 TEUs a month into Middle East. And if you look at what savings that we made, it's a phenomenal amount of money. The port cost for the vessel was $66,000 in Cochin, as against $10,200 in Colombo. For a minuscule saving, people will not look at or try and divert themselves from a port which is giving direct cargo. We were transshipping our boxes through Colombo, but now we can do it directly from Cochin all the way to the Middle East. Now, that is a huge advantage that we have. Now, between Colombo and Cochin, the freight rate will be at least $150 less. Colombo is $150 less, and they have at least 5 to 6 sailings every week directly from Colombo to Europe, Northwest continent. Whereas we have only one sailing that is going from Cochin to Northwest continent. So this is this quality of the service, the reliability of the service, and availability of the service at a lower cost would give Colombo, the shipper of Colombo, a huge advantage. If you were to assume that a container, a 20-foot container, were to carry about 20,000 shirts, which is stitched, and it takes 3 hours per shirt to be stitched, you're talking about 60,000 manpower which is lost, which is so much of employment opportunity that is there. Just because we are recognizing, we are not willing to recognize the difference in the cost, or for that matter, the $60 plus thousand dollars that is that you charge on a 6,000 TEU vessel. Yeah, when you compare that along with the port cost in Colombo, and that we are losing an opportunity to attract a direct vessel out of Cochin into Europe, then we certainly are shooting ourselves on our foot. This is something which we need to understand. This has to be quantified and this has to be put across. I had been attempting to do that for a long time, but it is not going anywhere close to their ears. It's going over their head. I do not know. But anyway, this is what is happening. This is not unique for Cochin. It is all over all the ports in India. I don't know how exactly they have structured it, but then this is something which has to be recognized. They often come out by saying that we would compete with Colombo. Yes, fine. Do that and make sure that we get more sailings. This could allow us to reduce our overall logistics cost. The breakup of domestic logistics cost is about 35% is for transportation. 60% of all our cargo is going by roadways. Only 7% of our cargo is going by waterways. This has to change. This should be reversed. 7% by road and 60% by sea or waterways would make a huge difference. The transportation cost is about 35%. Handling and warehousing is 9%. By introducing containers, this can be drastically and dramatically reduced. Inventory cost is 25%, primarily because the availability, the stocking of cargo in various places are the cost. I mean, that is going to be the cost of the inventories. This can be reduced if we have reliable shipping services, which would reduce the overall transportation cost. Packing is 11%, primarily because you are moving by trucks. There is every possibility that the packages can get damaged, but if you containerize it, that is going to reduce the possibility of damages. The losses is about 40%, and other cost is about 6%. Logistics cost and economic development. There is a direct relationship between the two. Logistics cost and the economic development. The composition of national economy and logistics cost. While logistics cost is about 25% of the delivered cost in some developed economies, it can be as low, developing economies, it can be as low as 8 to 9% in the developed economy. Transportation infrastructure influences the transportation cost. We have ports, and we talk about what we don't have, but we often forget to say what we have, or we think about what we have. Transportation is the key driver of the economic growth. Quality service providers are key elements in reduction of the logistics cost. In my opinion, my experience, when we look between Singapore, the geographic area between Singapore and Middle East in Dubai, about 30% of the total cargo is carried by people like us who are called the NVOCC, which is the non-vessel operating common carrier. And out of this 30% carried by the NVOCCs, 70% of them are either owned or operated by MLID. I'm the only person who is seated in Cochin. The rest of them are seated elsewhere, either in Dubai or Singapore or elsewhere. The enabling environment that we require in order to make Cochin a viable and a prospective place is to make it an enabling environment. Give us an enabling environment. I am in the courts and in the tax offices more or less every day of the week. I spend 80% of my time fighting the administration and 20% of my time fighting for the business or thinking about the business. This is something which we have to reverse. This is something which is very disheartening, and I have had a case when I was asked a particular tax was imposed on me, and I went back debating on it, and I told them that you have no jurisdiction because I pay my agent in a foreign country for a service which is generated and consumed overseas. Then the answer to that particular information that I gave, or the point that I took up, was that because you're seated in Cochin, conceptualizing and planning the business seated in Cochin, you need to pay the tax, reverse tax in Cochin. If I were to sit in Dubai and or Singapore, I would not have had to pay the tax. That is what the taxman is saying. So he's telling me, please get out of this place. Why are you giving us trouble? Is this an enabling environment that we need? This is not the way we should be working. According to studies, smooth flow of goods and commodities in India will bring about 1 to 2% of GDP growth. Why are we stopping? This is something which we'll have to do, and we'll have to make it possible. Known situation, in my opinion, the known situation in India, and my experience had been trucks waiting for drivers. There are absolute shortage of drivers. Ships are waiting for officers and crew. Offices are waiting for employable staff. We generate a lot of unemployable and unemployable, and we need to make them employable. Skilling and all of these things are being spoken of, but then when you start fighting a war all over the place, then we are unable to properly train or sort of employ more people. Production centers and factories are waiting for infrastructure, as well as in the current context, we are finding it extremely difficult in North India that there are no labor that is available. The working age of population would surpass the dependent age population in the next 20 years. We have more youngsters now, and we have the highest unemployment as of now, and it is only accentuating, and it is growing. 90% of cargo can be containerized, and this includes cargoes like liquids, gases, and bulk. So, containerization is the way forward, and I will take you through that in the next slides. When I said gases, at this point of time, LNG containers are available. I attempted to approach the concerned authorities, transportation authorities, to have LNG tankers. These are cryogenic tankers, which is used all over the world. It is allowed to be operated all over the world, but in order to operate domestically, we need special permissions, and that was not forthcoming. We were told that we will not be allowed to use a LNG tanker. But then when it comes from overseas, a LNG tanker can be allowed. You have LPG containers that are available. You see in the road that I am seated, that's the Airport Seaport Highway, and in the highways of Kerala, you see the moving boats, which is the LPG tankers which are moving all over the place. There is already an instruction or a judgment whereby the High Court has given a clear instruction to the petroleum companies that they have to shift the mode of transportation from road to any other way or mode of transportation. They approached the railways, and the railways said they can't do it because it's a hazard, because there are electrical lines which are going on top, which will not be allowed. This can go by sea. But unfortunately, I am unable to do so because of one simple reason. The petroleum companies will only go by what they have as a code right now, which would mean that I will have to compete with the road. I will not be in a position to do so because my overall carriage cost, which includes the handling cost, will be extremely high, and there is a pre and an on carriage. The pre-carriage and on-carriage put together will not make it possible for me to move at the same rate as a truck. The reason is I need to engage a truck to bring an empty container from the port to the refinery, fill it with the LPG, take it back to the port, and then put it on board a ship and take it across to, let's say, Bayport, from where it can be given to Chellari, which is about 25 kilometers from Bayport. It is possible that it can be done. But it has to be understood that these are the constraints that we have. And for a truck operator, it doesn't matter. It is easy because he is not having multiple handling or multiple leg in which he should be operating. But in order to take the danger off the road, we may have to concede to the fact that it can be carried at a higher price using a water motor. It will be a social nightmare if we were not to generate employment for the emerging 19 to 24-year population with a basic education of 8 to 10 years of schooling. This is very true. This is a social issue. And it is our responsibility as elders to make sure that we are giving them a fighting chance, for which we need to find out ways and means to improve the way in which we do business. The additional workforce has to be absorbed in the manufacturing sector. And to be most efficient, we should be most efficient in our transportation, which we can. We have to be leveraging our biggest asset, which is the population, and dream big. India and Indian shipping industry must break all barriers and carry 25% of the world's seaborne cargo. Why not? Because we are a service industry centric economy, and we are very good at providing services. I have had experiences when I was talking to the US counterparts of mine with regards to a particular inquiry with regard to a container. They say, we are closed for the day. You can call us next day morning. Well, in India, we will go the extra mile of sitting out late and finding out the exact details and passing it on. We are service centered. We should be in a position to do the 25% of the world's cargo. If Maersk has an objective of having 25%, if COSCO has declared that they will carry 25% of the world's cargo, why not India? This is my question. Sea transportation can provide the fill-up to the infrastructure deficit in India for domestic transportation as well. The government has taken a certain initiative, created a new council for development of logistics sector, enhancing efficiency and reducing cost. Reduction of logistic expenditure from 30 to 50% what we have to about 9 to 10% of the GDP is what we are looking at. By streamlining policies and procedures, we can get to this integrated growth figures. Kerala, in my opinion, is perhaps the best model state for infrastructure development for the rest of the country. Kerala. With a coastal distance of 475 kilometers between north and southern tip of Kerala, there are 4 international airports and there are 4 seaports capable of handling containers using shoreside equipment. That is, from any place in Kerala to the nearest airport and the nearest seaport is within 100 kilometers. Yesterday we have had an accident in Calicut, and we are still talking about a 5th airport. I do not understand why we have to do it. And well, what we also have is what they call the Silver Line, which is to connect the north of Kerala to south of Kerala using a semi-high-speed train with a transit time of about 5 hours. In 1983, I went to my headquarters in Switzerland, and then I found that there are 2 airports in Switzerland. That is one in the north, which is Zurich, and the one which is in the south, which is Geneva. In the middle somewhere is what is called Bern, which is the capital city of Switzerland. I have also landed in Bern. There is a Protocab in which they maintain the entire administration of the airport. They do not really have an airport other than a runway, which is used for the purpose of the diplomatic missions. From Zurich to Geneva, we have a train that is leaving Zurich airport to Geneva Airport every hour. So the entire length of the country is covered using this train. Anybody who wants to travel from anywhere to anywhere can check in at the airport and then get directly into the airport, from where the baggage will be automatically transferred, and that you can use your pass, boarding pass, and then the passport, and get on board the aircraft and fly. This is possible in Kerala. This is what the Silver Line is meant to do. We talk about what we do not have, but we do not consider what we really have. We are blessed with all this, but we do not understand that, and we do not value it. We still keep on crying like a spoiled child. Kerala has developed very well in this particular area. I'm very proud of it. Kerala minor ports did play a very important role. Today, by doing a bit more work, we should be in a position to develop all these minor ports and offer services on a regular basis from there. My next slides will show you that. Kerala is the most ideal model that can be adopted the whole of India. We have 187 minor ports and 12 major ports, which spend close to 200 ports in a 7,500 plus kilometer coastal, which meant that we should be in a position to provide a port in every 100 kilometers if we put our mind to it. If we were to adopt what Kerala has done in order to facilitate the port, the minor ports, we should be in a position to do that. Kerala is, in my opinion, Kerala is the best model that India can emulate for implementing the Sagarmala project. And we can more or less immediately start this off. See, as I said, we have all these ports in operation in Kerala. To connect from north to south, or let's say from production centers in Gujarat all the way to south, it is my belief that if we were to use the ports to the fullest potential, the minor ports which we have to the fullest potential, it is my belief that we would be in a position to save between 5 and 10,000 rupees per TEU, which is being used or consumed in Kerala. This is Bepur port, and this is the ship that I built for taking the vessel into the minor ports and to prove that it is possible. It was a very small ship. It was 94 TEU vessel, and we did operate this vessel for about 24 months between Bombay and all the way south. We were not in a position to break even, primarily because the cargo support was absolutely zilch. We had to fight each and every step of the way, and finally we had to let go. And I sold the vessel, and I said, "This is it. I can't take it anymore. I lost a few $1 million." This is the ship operating in Calicut. The purpose of the slide is to show you that a lever crane with a coastal with a normal truck, we are in a position to operate a container into Calicut port, which is a very minor port. It's a fishing harbor. If you were to compare Kannur, I think is still bigger and larger than Calicut, and it has got a better draft. It has about 6.5 meter draft. So I propose that we start a service from Navalaki or Kandla to the minor ports and the major ports in Kerala. The reason why I say this is that Navalaki is about 30 kilometers from Morbi, which is the largest tile manufacturing sector or tile manufacturing area in India. And Kerala is one of the largest consuming or consumption area as far as tiles are concerned. These are heavy cargoes. Today, a container is routed. I'm also doing the business. An empty container is picked up from Mundra hauled 220 kilometers to Morbi, stuffed and returned back 220 kilometers to Mundra, from where it is loaded onto a vessel which comes to Cochin, which is discharged in Cochin, and if it is to go to Calicut, then it has to be hauled 220 kilometers into Calicut and then empty returned back from Calicut to Cochin. We're talking about close to about 900 kilometers of the haul, which can be saved completely by introducing a minor port directly. This is why this was the purpose for which I built the ship. But I was unfortunate, I mean, the ship was very small, and what I would propose is that we let go with a larger vessel. I will show you the details in the next slide. If we were to do a north-south run on the west coast, the Sagarmala project would come into play. That is that if we were to load a container from Kandla, which is very close to Mundra, connecting it all the way to south, which is mostly connecting the production centers of Gujarat, it can reduce a large cost, or I mean, at least 10 to 15,000 rupee can be saved per container, which is being moved from Morbi and Mundra into Cochin and Calicut. So the incentivization by the government of Kerala, I don't think is the right approach to go by. It is to look at how we can potentially use the assets on which we have already invested. That is to maximize or optimize on the Kannur, Calicut and Koilon port, the investments that has gone in there, to maximize that. What we lack today is the hardware to go into these ports. So I had run a schedule from Kandla all the way to Koilon and turn around and go back to Kandla via Nhava Sheva, whereby we will be in a position to take export cargo also from all these minor ports, because these minor ports are ready with the customs and all procedures in order to pass the bill of entries and whatever, and then it can be transshipped via Nhava Sheva. Today, all these containers are coming to Cochin, from where it is going to Colombo for transshipment. Instead, we can take it directly from the minor ports to Nhava Sheva and transship the boxes out of Nhava Sheva into the mainland vessels, which goes to the final destination. This will reduce the overall transportation cost. In my opinion, at least $150 to $200 can be saved by doing this. These are the incentives that we have. So now, I was looking at scheduling the vessel. In accordance with my calculation, the round trip is about 2,174 nautical miles at a speed of about 10 knots. We should be in a position to do that round trip in about 14 days with a 5-day port stay in all these ports. And if you deploy 2 vessels into the service, we will be in a position to provide a weekly service. The rotation is Kandla, Pobandar, Nhava Sheva, Kannur, Calicut, Cochin, Koilon, Mangalore, Nhava Sheva, back to Kandla. There are commercial reasons, because we are unable to get any domestic cargo from southern India on the north port. So I was trying to replace it with the international cargo to be reshipped or transshipped via Nhava Sheva. So this is in as much as the West Coast is concerned. So the Sagarmala, if we were to break it into 2 pieces, one is on the West Coast north and south. If we deploy 2 ships, it is possible, and that immediately this operations can be started. Likewise, in the East Coast, we can connect it from Karaikal all the way to Haldia or Calcutta and return back. The 2 ships will be in a position to do that. The most ideal ship that I have found is what is called, in Europe, there is a service called MCP, meaning container pool, which is operated by a few operators, and they sell the commercial slots. These are the specs of the vessel. She's a 7,700 deadweight, at about 6.5 meter draft. If we were to deepen our ports, Kannur, Calicut by about 1 more meter or make it about 7.5 meters, we will be in a position to deploy this vessel. This vessel can carry 618 TEUs is the profile, and in my opinion, about 250 to 300 TEUs at about 30 tons. So this is the kind of vessel, and these are vessels which are available. About 15 to 20 of them are all still in operation in Europe, and these vessels can be chartered, and it will not cost us much to charter these vessels and bring it into India and operate in this particular sector in the north-south route. This would allow the coastal service to start off, and that would definitely reduce the overall transportation cost. Apart from this, what we need is a shift or the understanding from the government that at least 30% of all the cargo of the PSUs, if they can divert it to sea, then we get northbound cargo. There is enough of cargo which is going northbound, but most of it is going by truck. When I say when we try and convert from the road mode to the sea mode, for every 20-foot tractor trailer that goes around, we are actually, it is about 11 car units, which meant that by taking away one container from the road, we are making additional space for about 11 car units. That can be used, and we don't have to increase the overall infrastructure by way of road. We don't have to use the precious land that we have for having additional roads. And these roads are expensive. We are knowingly or unknowingly subsidizing this operation. The truckers are taking advantage of it, basically because the taxes that are being paid are far low. And today, the cost of construction of road, and if we were to compare a replacement by waterways, it will be far higher. It is not only in the operating cost, it is also in the infrastructure cost. In a monopolistic market, state-owned enterprise, there is very limited incentive for them, for the stakeholders, to be innovative and try to reduce the cost. Regulations and taxation in India is phenomenal. There is absolute uncertainty as a consequence of it. You cannot make any decisions. These are things which has to be changed. I conclude because I think I have overstepped my time. In conclusion, I would say, in a world where more than half the population unfortunately remains at the bottom of the pyramid, the demand on humanity is to provide them better resources for the needy and the company. It is important that we innovate and reduce the cost of goods and services. Shipping, I believe, has an important role and historical role to play in the process. Wish you all the very best. Keep safe. Keep yourself safe. We have coronavirus all over the place. It will also go. Let us go with some actionable agenda. President Obama said, yes, we can. I think we should sign off by saying that, yes, we can do this. There are some points that I said that perhaps it is too detailed that I spoke of. We could be checked in detail, and we could, if there is any assistance that is required, then I'll be more than happy to be providing that. Thank you very much, indeed. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Johnson, sir. That was a very informative session. You have established without a doubt that coastal shipping can be made very efficient and comparatively safer mode of transport, which could greatly relieve the pressure on rail and road transport. I would request the audience to give a round of applause by clicking the appropriate reaction icon on the bottom of the Zoom window. That's the best we can do other than physically clapping.
Thank you very much, indeed.
So now we will just move on to the question and answer session. I have got a few questions. The first one is from Mr. Shivram, that he is with the business development team of Cochin Shipyard. What do you think is the single biggest challenge for India to have a model shift and go for full exploration and exploitation of the waterways for both coastal as well as inland? And how do we overcome this?
Okay, in as much as coastal is concerned, it is my belief that we are ready, we are capable of doing it. It's a question of having the hardware. The hardware, there are multiple ways of doing it. One is to charter in vessels, it is now being allowed. It was not allowed for a long period of time. It is now being allowed, which meant that we can charter a vessel which is suitable for this minor port operations. A 7,000 to 8,000 ton vessel is the right option that we have, and it is possible that we can charter these vessels and do the test runs. But it cannot be done by a single company like me, because there is a compelling reason that it has to be commercially viable. It will take at least 2 to 3 years before we're in a position to establish, and we would be in a position to say to a customer, yes, as an example, on a Monday there is a vessel in Bepur port which is going to Bombay, and that your container can be loaded on board that vessel, and that will get transshipped on so and so vessel. Because there are certain amount of uncertainties in it. We need at least 2 to 3 ships to be deployed. Nobody can afford that kind of operation and that kind of risk. I did this operation for about 2 years, and I failed miserably because I did not get that. I could not get one container going normal, other than those containers which we generated transshipped via Nhava Sheva. Whereas there is a lot of cargo that is going from Cochin to Colombo to be transshipped on Colombo, and that can easily be converted, and the entire transshipment operation can also be done out of India, which would mean that none of this cost is going out of the country. There is a certain accumulation of money, that is being spent, which can be accumulated back in Indian economy.
Thank you, sir. So we'll move on to the next one, which is from Mr. VJ Jose. What he wants to know is with the current, situation with China, and one of the major importers from China were India. Would it have a positive effect on coastal shipping? Because now imports are going to be reduced from China. What can you say about that, sir?
In my opinion, we are shooting on our foot, I would say, because at the end of the day, today a large amount of components are being manufactured in China. It has to be sourced out of China. If you were to compare all the electronic goods that are being assembled, that are being produced in India, so to say, most of the components are coming from China. Now, unless we produce it, for example, we have had some consignments that moved from Shenzhen to Trivandrum for assembling computers in Trivandrum, and we had successfully done that. And a product has come out called Coconuts. It's a laptop that is being manufactured in Trivandrum, or rather, it is being assembled. The entire components come from Shenzhen. All economies around the world grew on the back of assembly as an activity. China grew on the basis of assembly as an activity, which was supported by the technology, and the components were moved either from Korea or from Japan or elsewhere. And that's how the assembly lines came into action. Likewise, we are in a position to do that. We should be having a relationship with China, and we should continue to be importing our things, and we should start continuing to manufacture it in India. Until such time, we are able to produce all components in India. Today, we are unable to do so. Nobody in this world are self-sufficient. Everybody are dependent. So we'll have to take a very pragmatic and direct approach to it, and be honest with what we are. If we have shortage, we have to be shortage. We have to find a source of it. If it is only being produced in China, we are not going to say that we are not going to produce that particular item because it's produced. Unless it is made available, nobody can produce it. The cellular phones, most of the components are manufactured in China. And it's being assembled in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Thailand, and all over the place. This can also be done in Cochin. If we were to reduce, or if we were to restrict ourselves by saying that we will not import it from China, so be it. They have absolutely no problem. They can get it produced in Indonesia. They can produce it in Sri Lanka. Yeah. So I think we have to be pragmatic about it. We have to be practical and realistic about it.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Mr. Sudhir Subeda, he has a question which deals with, it seems there's a primary legislation regarding coastal shipping pending since 2014. And is the Sagabala project exclusively with an eye on port development or anything else as well?
I'm not privy to this information. I do not have. I have no idea.
Incidentally, Captain Subedar is from Mumbai. You know, we have a few guests coming from Mumbai, Chennai, and Pune, and all that. You know, so they are most welcome, and then we express our gratitude to them. Please carry on.
Captain Subedar, would you like to add to that? Anything, if you want specific?
I was wanting to know when is primary legislation on the subjects of ports and merchant shipping and inland vessel likely to be brought forward before the government?
Sorry, sir, I do not have any information on it, nor I am involved in it. I'm not taken a view on it and or inquired about it.
Okay, sir. The next one is which is more relevant. We have been watching and seeing WhatsApp video. This is from Mr. Mugundan. The 70-ton special purpose, equipment being towed by a truck all the way from Nasik to Trivandrum by road. So, what has stopped from bringing it by sea? Now, this was a question on every mariner's mind. At least part of it could have been done by the coastal side and then by road. You have any opinion on that, sir?
Do we have the necessary tonnage or hardware available? I don't think so. We do not have a regular service. We do not have a regular service as of now from north to south in the west coast. Only if there is a service, this kind of activities could be made or this could be done. Basically, let's put it this way: if we were to assume that on every Sunday or a Monday there is a vessel that is sailing from Bombay to Koilam, as an example, then it could have been, from Nasik it could have been brought to Bombay and loaded on board the vessel and brought to Koilam. Yeah, so it's a question of chicken or egg. We do not have a hardware or a ship which is operating now on a regular basis.
Okay, sir. I think that's true. We don't have a regular service. Now, this is from Mr. Alex Anthony. He wants to know, in the prevailing condition with coastal shipping, would RoRo be a positive option? RoRo service, other than containers?
I do not think so. Basically, because let's put it this way: RoRo service is only for short hauls. Otherwise, it will not work on a long haul. Primarily because of the simple reason: if you have to accommodate the drivers on board the vessel, then the regulations are very different. Yeah, and why should it be in a, if we can control our portside costs? For example, in Kerala, we are being heavily subsidized by Kerala government, the Kerala Maritime Board, and the port is now giving us a very good offer by way of handling cost. I am not talking about subsidy. Handling cost. Handling cost is very low. If a container today costs you about, let's say about 1.5 to 2 lakh rupees in Indian prices, whereas a truck would cost you anything close to about 10 lakh rupees. So it's an asset which is going to be loaded on board the vessel, and if the transit time is the same, why should the asset of a 10 lakh rupees? I mean, the asset cost of a truck is five times more than that of a container. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
So if we have shoreside handling equipments available as of now, the prices are very reasonable. It is comfortable that we can operate it like. But this is a model that has to be adopted and approved by Government of India, and it has to be implemented all over. Because if you were to load a container out of Mundra, you pay heavily for it. Whereas in Calicut and in the minor ports of India, minor ports of Kerala, the charges are very, very low, which is good.
Sir, the same way with the BS6 emission norms kicking already in place, don't you think there will be a systemized shift to coastal shipping because the trucks and the other road transport modes are much more difficult and more expensive for them to match with these BS6 norms?
Yeah, it's bound to be there. It's bound to be there when it comes. But let's put it this way. I mean, you know, how far, I mean, how good are we in implementing these regulations? Again, depends on that. Because how can you compete when we have to follow the entire rules and another set of people who are competing with us does not have to do it?
Yeah, that's true, sir. It's an uneven playing field.
Yes.
So one other question which has come up is, you know, like the airports all around India has an airport authority of India, whereas ports, they have port trusts, but generally there's no one single umbrella under which all the ports come in, both, you know, minor as well as major. Do you think that will help if we have a port authority of India for, you know, streamlining all the activities, both coastal?
We have too many regulatory authorities already. Yeah. I think if it's a state subject, leave it to them. Let them decide. Yeah.
Do you feel it will help or further worsen the situation?
Yeah. I do not believe the DGCA is functioning perfectly.
Sir, I think we'll come to the end of this with one last question from Mr. Ajay Pillai. We are all looking forward to Karudal 2. Do you have any plans in place?
Karudal 2 is no. I nearly died trying to build that ship and operate it. Okay. If I talk to my wife and my children, they will kick me out of my home.
Johnson, sir, things really changed since then, right, sir?
I'm not very sure about it. Do I have to take a risk?
Come on, sir. You know that things changed, don't you?
You know, it took us a lot of effort to do so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the last time we met on board Karudal, sir, and yes. I could still feel there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of passion in you. So we hope.
No. So I always say Cochin should be the shipping capital of India. The simple reason to it is we have the largest, the biggest, and the most sophisticated shipyard in India in Cochin. We have a university which has got the naval architect as a department. We have Dr. Simon, who was heading the engineering, the maritime marine engineers courses. So we have enough of it. We have everything around us. I believe if you were to consider, I think it will be about less than about a dozen countries in the world who has built an aircraft carrier. One of which is India, and the aircraft carrier was built in Cochin. Yeah. And there are less than 15 countries in this world who can build a LNG carrier. Okay, we are one of that, and Cochin Shipyard is the place where we can build it. We have the technology with us. It's just that we don't have the orders. Go and get it, and it has to be supported. It has to be supported by all means, by everybody. I would like to add one more thing. I had a friend of mine. I have a colleague of mine, a German. His name is Matthias Emrike. He came, they placed order for 4 vessels. The ship was delayed heavily, and he came to Cochin and he started screaming and yelling at me, and he said all F words were used, and then he said to me, I was so upset with Cochin Shipyard, but all said and done, he said to me, at the end of the day, I can guarantee you one thing. The quality of the workmanship, or rather the workmanship, the quality of your people, the labor, the class, everything is very good, and it is comparable to that of Germany. And in my mind, immediately what went through is that we have very well trained, very efficient, competent people around us. The shipyard is capable of producing high quality vessels. And we are getting a German quality technician at Indian wages, Indian prices. So that is something which we have to capitalize on, and that is what we should be building on. We can use it. If we were to ask anybody who has built ships in Cochin shipyard, they will say the quality is best and they get a resale value much better than any ship built anywhere else. In China, what I found was anybody who can hold their welding cost without shivering is made a welder. Okay? And they are the ones who produce the ship. Today, 90% of all ships which are built are being built in China. So, in 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, any of these ships that you see on board must have been built in China. So, what are we talking about? Why can't we do it here? Yeah.
Correct.
Thank you very much, sir. I think we have covered all the areas of this speech today, of the presentation today. I think we are a little bit behind schedule. I straight away move over to Sony sir, who will be proposing the vote of thanks. Over to you, Sony sir.
Thank you, Deepak. Good evening. We could not agree anything lesser than what Mr. Johnson Mathai was telling, the regulatory and the tax overhang of the Indian system. Anyway, my job is not that. I am here to say out of thanks. I would like to finish it off very fast as it is, we are late. Chief guest of the day, Mr. Johnson Mathai, CMD, Transasia Group, Kochi, Professor Dr. K.S. Simon, Director, Albertian Maritime Institute, Chairman, all office bearers, members of IMEI, CMMI, and Mariners Society, all the invitee participants, friends, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to propose the vote of thanks to all those who have made this a reality. There's a powerful saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. With the limited knowledge I have of Mr. Johnson Mathai, he seems to have exploited few crises in his prime journey to the top. That Karudal is an example, it seems. He's a visionary and a trailblazer in most of the field in which he is associated with. I would like to extend a very hearty vote of thanks to Mr. Johnson Mathai, CMD of Transasia Group, Cochin, for gracing this occasion and the thought-provoking address. I wish him all the best. Professor Dr. K. Simon is a man full of devoted to maritime industry and training. With his energy and dedication, we, the maritime fraternity, can expect much more. I express my profound gratitude for his efforts in making this a reality and a success. The chairman and maritime committee members of IMEI Kochi have put in quite a bit of seamless effort to conduct this webinar. I extend my sincere thanks to one and all. I take this opportunity to extend our sincere thanks to all the office bearers and members of IMEI, CMMI, Mariners Society, and all the local and outstation attendees who have taken their time out to attend this event. Use this occasion to extend my sincere thanks to the Maritime Student Fraternity for showing interest and taking their time out for this webinar. My sincere thanks to all who have made it to this function. Thanks to all. Jai Hind.
Thank you.